First story. I was 18 at the time, driving from my hometown to my new college. My inexpensive SUV's trunk and seats were crammed full of my belongings. I was a little anxious because this was not only my first lengthy road trip without my family, but it was also going to be my first prolonged separation from them. In any case, I divided the 600 total between 2 driving days according to the recommendations I was following. I was following the directions on the maps, and it said I should get at the hotel at 11 p.m. But I knew I'd probably arrive much later because of potential traffic, stopping for gas and grabbing dinner. By 7 o'clock, both the sun and the majority of the cars had disappeared. Occasionally, a car would drive by and I would see its headlights gradually disappear in front of me. But it was just me for the majority of the drive. I was genuinely bored and exhausted by this. I made the decision at around 10 to make the last few miles of the drive by stopping at the next petrol station. After 10 or so minutes, I pulled off the road and went into a gas station. This wasn't a town or anything. It was so far out. It was essentially simply a small convenience shop and petrol station with a few pumps. Not only were there no other cars in the lot or on the road, but I could not even make out the lights from any distant houses or buildings. I stopped as soon as I reached a pump to begin filling up my tank. I was looking around when a guy approached me and nearly gave me the jump scare. He was much older than me. I would estimate he was in his 50s, and he genuinely appeared to be homeless. Still, I wasn't expecting to be contacted out here, and his little smile didn't help me feel any more at ease. "Hi, do you need something?" Saying that, I hoped he wouldn't come any closer. The man pulled to a stop a few feet away from my car and gave the area a wary glance before answering. "Take the exit back onto the highway," he said. I wasn't sure whether I was comprehending him when I glanced at him bewildered. He repeated himself and gestured to the exit I had come from behind me. "Take the exit back onto the highway." I said, "Okay," and the man left after a few moments. However, I was still somewhat perplexed. It was a one-way road. The exit I came from that he wanted me to take again. By his reasoning, I should have made a U-turn and driven on the incorrect side of the road to get back onto the freeway. It was illogical, to put it simply. I noticed that there was no construction or obstruction in the way of the evident access road that I was instructed to take. All that was visible was an empty ramp leading back onto the roadway. I looked at the man who was now merely leaning against the convenience store as I reinstalled the pump and got into my car. But the more I considered it, the more absurd it seemed to me that he was simply sitting here talking gibberish. Perhaps this was a trap of some sort, I wondered. Following my gut, I pulled out of the lot and headed for the highway entrance. However, as soon as I turned into it, I noticed that almost all of the street lights were out. I reduced my speed, speculating that there might be construction going on nearby. I made sure to be alert by keeping my attention on the road straight ahead. However, as I continued on the dimly lit road, I only saw a glimpse of a man to my left before an unexpected pickup truck suddenly stopped in front of my vehicle. 4 men, brandishing knives, machetes, and metal bats among other weapons, leaped out of the vehicle and charged my car, opening every door and revealing their faces. Their expressions seemed devoid of emotion, as if they had no sense of the consequences of their actions. They were within a few feet from my windows when I had to start backing up. And as soon as I had retraced my steps enough, I saw the outline of several dozen people emerging from the roadside shadows. As I quickly and hastily pulled out of there, a few even attempted to chase my car. I spun around and drove away. After I felt safe, I called 911, but for some reason, I never heard back from them. It was as if they never even bothered to check on me. Strangely enough, though, it was the eerie old man at the gas station who attempted to stop me from even becoming involved in that situation. That's what I assume he was doing. Anyway, in any case, I had no idea what that was or what they were all about to do, so I consider myself really fortunate to have escaped that situation with my life. Second story. It was an ordinary Friday night. I was working late on DoorDash after my college studies ended. I used to follow this weekly schedule of dashing on the weekends to assist cover all of my living expenses while attending college. We completed a good number of orders and made a decent amount of money early in the evening. And then, following the major dinner rush, things came to a standstill. Orders were coming in very infrequently, and the ones that did were mostly low-paying and essentially time wasters. However, after driving around aimlessly for an hour, a decent order eventually came through. Even though it was 8 miles distant, the cost was definitely worth it. It wasn't outrageous, but it was sufficient to distinguish it from many of the others that were scams. After accepting the order, I hurried inside the restaurant to get the bag before getting into my car and driving away. According to the map, it would take half an hour, which was probably the longest order I had ever completed. The majority of the homes were located close to university because, beyond 15 to 20 minutes, the area essentially becomes empty grass fields. After 20 minutes, it was only those few houses, most of them sitting far out in fields of crops, with nothing else around. The remaining 10 minutes of the drive followed these farms on this deserted road. I arrived at the residence after that. A modest home was at the far rear of the big field where a dirt driveway connected to the road. Even though I don't feel nervous easily, driving through the field was really unsettling. This had a distinct feel. The quiet rumble of my automobile on the gravel road became the only sound as I moved farther away from the road. I stopped in front, prepared the bag, and turned the car on before getting out. The porch light was the only source of illumination outside the calm, dark house. I made my way up to the porch through the disheveled grass and rapped on the door. I waited, staring back at my dark, parked car and the utterly black expanse behind it. After a little interval, I knocked once more. However, there was no reply, not even a sound from inside. It was unsuccessful. I yearned for the realization of the peculiar circumstances, observing the absence of any lights coming from the windows and appreciating the house's extreme degradation up close. The porch light was on, and I had an order for this location, which was the only thing that led me to believe it couldn't be abandoned. Why would it be the only light? I wondered as I stared at the light. However, by strange accident, I was able to identify that the top part of the case included a low-cost solar battery. It was merely an automated light that required no human presence to switch on. It charged throughout the day and turned on at night. But as I was putting everything together, there was a rumbling noise from behind me. As I turned, I noticed a car following closely behind my vehicle on the gravel route. I remained there looking at their headlights for a moment till a man came out. He didn't respond when I yelled from the porch, asking if this was his instruction. He didn't say anything or move from where he was standing next to his car. I started to realize how terrible this situation probably was, and my adrenaline started to soar. The night silence served just as a reminder that no one was available to assist me. Between a stranger and an empty house, I found myself stranded in the midst of a field. I dropped the bag in an instantaneous, instinctive reaction and bolted from the porch, racing past the house and onto the grass. I turned to face the man as he approached from behind. I ran frantically forward, and the grass became taller and thicker the farther I went until it obscured my view in every direction. I realized then that there was no way the guy was going to pursue me. I attempted to be quiet in case the man was still looking for me, so I slowed down and caught my breath as I made my way cautiously through the crops. I eventually reached another person's yard and a road where I could get a signal strong enough to phone for assistance. When the police arrived to check on my car after picking me up, the man had left. However, I was somewhat abacked to find that the food bag was still on the porch of the abandoned house and that my car had not been looted. However, that could only indicate that the individual was up to anything more sinister than simply robbing me. Third story. I was traveling from the East Coast to the far West Coast to deliver a truckload of goods to a company. I've driven trucks for nearly 20 years, so I've gone this particular route across the nation numerous times. Every time I go on one of these excursions, everything remains the same. The trucks halt, the roads, and everything else. But in all these years, nothing genuinely extraordinary has happened to me. A few strange situations have crossed my mind, but they have never materialized. I was thus worry-free as I drove this road once more. It was simply another workday. After traveling for almost 20 hours, a storm began to approach, which caused my speed to decrease. I was searching for the next truck stop to sleep at by that point because it was also late. But all of a sudden, a light emerged behind me while I was driving. Since the route I was on was straight and level, I could have seen them approaching through my mirror. But all of a sudden, they were trailing me closely. I had no idea. Maybe they had just switched on their lights or something. But they soon approached the back directly. I continued to watch them until the trailer totally hid them from view. Their headlights bouncing off the back was all that was visible to me. Then, though their lights went out, I continued to drive at my usual speed, keeping an eye on my mirrors to see if I could still see them behind me. But how could I know? It was crazy for someone to switch off their lights during a strong storm, but it was equally crazy for them to be following me so closely. Thank goodness. I could tell I was almost out of whatever this was because a sign indicated there was a truck stop 5 miles ahead. It's difficult not to consider the idea that it was an attempted robbery as a truck driver, especially when you're alone on the road at night. However, I didn't want to draw judgments based on just some strange conduct. I saw nothing of them behind me for the next 5 miles. Even though I couldn't really see anything, I was still on edge, but as I approached the truck stop, my anxiety began to fade. As I approached, I tried to look in my mirrors to see if anyone had followed, but it was just too difficult to determine because of the rain and the dimness. Other for a few vehicles at the petrol pumps, the truck stop was largely deserted. I parked in the center of the lot after swerving to the side. I waited a minute, straightened out some of my belongings, then opened the truck door and peered out to see the side of the trailer. In a few seconds, the rain had soaked me through, but there didn't appear to be a car behind me. With a small sigh of relief, I locked the door and grabbed my blanket and pillow from the passenger side. I shut off the truck, locked the doors, and tried to sleep. It was easy to nod off, the sound of the rain beating down on the metal roof drowning out any potential sounds from other trucks rolling in and out. However, I felt like I had only been asleep for a short while when I woke up. I looked around and saw that the storm was still there, if not more so, and that it was still dark outside. However, the truck was shaken by a loud thump before I could check my mirrors. My eyes widened. I grabbed the door handle and pulled it open, glancing through the rain at the rear of the trailer. The silhouette of a car with its headlights off and 2 men moving ahead of it was all that was visible to me. I was so terrified that I was hesitant to approach them. I was pushed backward into the driver's seat as the door abruptly smashed on my body while I sat there hesitating. I was told to stay where I was by another man who was standing outside before he slammed the door once more. I was unable to do anything because his right hand was stuck in his sweatshirt and there were 2 additional males behind the truck. I was sitting there, staring at the guy at my door, and I could feel the truck trembling. He never even averted his gaze. After a few minutes of this, they hurried back to their car and departed. As I saw their automobile vanish from sight onto the road, I was still stunned. I reported the incident and phoned the police, but I never found out who the men were. All I know is that I probably wouldn't have made it out as securely as I did if I had been any less alert and had simply tried to drive off at the first sight of the men.